There's a stretch of forest in the north of Japan. Txt, up in the northern reaches of Japan, lies a forest where the birds have unlearned their songs. Walk deep enough, past the highest logging cuts, beyond where trail markers lose all meaning, and you'll sense it before you can name it. First the crows fall mute, then the smaller songbirds, and finally even the wind seems to hold its breath. The Ainu, those who lived on that land long before any borders were drawn, have a word for that silence. They rarely speak it aloud, and only when absolutely necessary. In the autumn of 1919, a Japanese forestry surveyor by the name of Sotaro Kurihara heard that word uttered once. In a small mountain village that appears on no modern map, spoken by an old Ainu elder, who had spent most of his life not speaking of it. Sotaro lived another 15 years after that autumn. He never repeated the word, but he recorded it. He inscribed it in a small brown notebook that eventually found its way into a wooden crate, sealed away in the back of a shipping office in Otaru. There it remained for over 4 decades, until a caretaker with time to spare opened it out of curiosity. Inside were Sotaro's papers, field maps, ration receipts, letters he never posted to his wife. Beneath it all, wrapped twice in oiled canvas, sat the notebook. Tonight, I aim to share what he wrote in it. But before we begin, a brief note. If the kind of tale I tell here is one you'd want more of, not just one, but 10, each told in full in a voice suited for the dark, there exists a collection, What the Mountain Keeps. 10 files from 10 counties, 5 states spanning 1893 to 1955. Each one describes someone walking into seemingly easy ground, and each was closed by the authorities with the wrong word. 10 hours to sit within the darkness, from start to finish. The link is in the description and pinned at the top of the comments. Now then, before we head up into those trees, do me a small favor. Let me know where you're listening from tonight. What country, what time it is where you sit. I like knowing who's out there with me in the dark. And if you have ever, even once, been in a forest that felt like it was watching you, put that in the comments too. I want to know how far this thing reaches. Now, Sotaro Kurihara was 34 years old the autumn he journeyed north. Tall for his era, lean, with the beginnings of a stoop from years hunched over survey books. He wore small round spectacles that always fogged in the cold, and his knuckles were stained a permanent brown from pine resin. He hailed from Saitama, but the Imperial Forestry Bureau had moved him around so often he no longer felt tied to any particular place. He had a wife named Fuzi who wrote him twice a month, and a black dog named Kuro that Fuzi kept for him while he was away. By all accounts, he was a patient man with figures, and an impatient one with everything else. He was dispatched to Hokkaidō that year because the government wanted an accounting of the timber standing above a certain river valley in the Kitami Highlands. Not to harvest it yet, just to know. There had been talk since the war in Europe ended that Japan would need more lumber than the home islands could supply. And Hokkaidō, the cold northern island most in Tokyo still regarded as a wilderness, held trees no one had yet tallied. So Sotaro was to tally them. He was assigned an assistant, a young man from Yokohama named Watanabe Ryohei, who was 28, eager, and had never seen a mountain taller than a temple hill. He was given a mule, a tent, 2 rifles for bear protection, 3 months of provisions, and a printed letter authorizing him to requisition guides, from any village along his path. He was also given a hand-drawn map with the valley circled, and in the corner, a small neat notation in unfamiliar handwriting. 2 prior surveys attempted, both incomplete. Recommend local assistance. Sotaro read that line, and according to his notebook, thought little of it at the time. He and Watanabe took the train as far as the tracks went. Then a wagon, then their own feet. And by mid-September they had walked themselves into a country that felt less and less like the one they had left. The maples turned. The birches turned. The days shortened more quickly than they were accustomed to. The rivers ran cold and clear and loud, and the villages grew smaller and smaller until they were barely villages at all. Just a handful of houses in a clearing with smoke rising from a hole in the roof. A rack of drying fish out front, and a dog that watched them without barking. On the 4th of October, in the last of the daylight, they came upon Avafkoten, a village that Sotaro would spend the rest of his life trying not to recall the name of. It sat in a bowl of land between 2 ridges, where a small river bent sharply west. There were 9 houses, Assisi, the Ainu called them. Long, low structures with steep thatched roofs of reed and cattail, walls of pounded bark, no chimneys. Smoke seeped slowly from the roof ridges and hung over the valley like a lid. It was cold enough by then that Sotaro could see his breath, and quiet enough that he could hear his own heartbeat when he stopped walking. A woman was scaling salmon at a wooden trough near the river. She glanced up at them once, then returned to her work without a second look. An older man emerged to greet them. He was small, wary, no more than 5'3", with a full white beard that reached the middle of his chest and eyebrows, so thick they seemed to jut forward from his face. His eyes were deep, set, the color of wet stone. He wore an azatush robe woven from the inner bark of the elm tree, patterned in dark and light bands. He walked with a slight hitch in his right hip. Something Sotaro would later learn came from a bear encounter 40 years prior. His name was Ramatak, an Ainu word meaning roughly brave heart. He was 68 years old that autumn. He greeted them politely in Japanese, though it was clear Japanese was not his first language, and he chose each word with care. As a man selects stones for a wall, he asked what business had brought them. Sotaro showed the letter. Ramatak read it, or appeared to, handed it back, and said the 2 men were welcome to stay the night in his Assisi, and that they should eat something before they spoke of where they intended to go. Inside, it was warm and dark, smelling of smoke, dried herbs, and something Sotaro could not immediately identify. Something faintly sweet, like sap from a cut log. The fire pit sat in the center of the floor. Beside it, on a low woven mat, sat Ramatak's wife Chupet, perhaps 3 years younger than her husband, with the traditional dark tattoo around her mouth that married Ainu women of that generation wore. Though Sotaro had been instructed by his superiors never to remark upon it, she smiled at them without showing her teeth and gestured to the mats across the fire. They ate stewed venison, dried millet, and a soup with mountain vegetables Sotaro did not recognize. Ramatak did not eat. He watched them eat. When they were finished and Watanabe had begun to yawn behind his hand, the old man finally spoke. "You have a paper," he said in his careful Japanese, "that says which trees you want." "Yes," Sotaro said. "May I see the paper again?" Sotaro handed it across the fire. Ramatak held it near the flame for light and moved a knotted finger down the page. When he came to the valley, the one the government wanted counted, he stopped. His finger lingered on the paper for a long time, long enough that Watanabe, tired and warm, and not yet understanding what he was in, glanced at Sotaro with the beginnings of a smile, the kind of smile a city man gives another city man when a countryman is being slow. Sotaro did not smile back. "This valley," Ramatak said at last, "you cannot go up this valley." "Why not?" "Because," the old man said, "there is nothing to count in it." Sotaro waited. When Ramatak did not continue, he said gently, "The maps say otherwise. There is timber there. Good timber, old growth. The bureau. The trees are there," Ramatak said. "I did not say there are no trees. I said there is nothing to count." Watanabe laughed a small, polite laugh, the kind that isn't really a laugh, and said, "Grandfather, I don't follow." Ramatak looked at him, not unkindly, but steadily, the way you look at a small dog that has wandered onto thin ice. "You will follow," he said. "You will follow it very soon." He handed the paper back to Sotaro, stood, and said the guest bedding was against the far wall, and that he and his wife would be asleep before the fire burned down. In the morning, they would speak more about where a man could and could not place his feet. They lay on the mats in the dark, and Watanabe whispered in the way young men do when they think an old man cannot hear them, that the Tezakashi was a superstitious fellow, wasn't he? That this was the kind of place where mail arrived twice a year, where people still believed in tree gods, and that in the morning Sotaro should show him the paper again with the bureau seal, and remind him that the government did the counting now. Sotaro said nothing. He lay awake a long while, listening to the fire settle, to the wind through the reeds of the roof, and to something farther off up on the ridge. Something that might have been an owl, and might not. In the morning, Ramatak was already awake, outside sharpening a wooden pole against a stone. Chupet was inside coaxing the fire back to life. Sotaro stepped out and stood beside the old man for a time, saying nothing, watching the mist descend from the ridges and pool in the valley floor. After a while the old man spoke without looking up. "You will go up there anyway. I have orders. I know. I have been given orders in my life. I have seen what orders can make a man do." He drew the file down the length of the pole once, twice, a third time. "I will send someone with you. His name is Ayoro. He is my sister's son. He knows the mountain better than I do now. He will take you as far as he can take you. He will not go past a certain place. When he says he will not go past that place, you will listen to him. Do you understand?"
Yes.
Ramatak stopped sharpening. He looked up at Sotaro with those deep, set eyes. "There is something in that valley," he said. "That has been there since before we came. Before the heirs schism came. The Ainu word for Japanese and for outsiders. It has been there since before there were people to know it. It is not a bear. It is not a wolf. It is not a spirit of any of the shapes we make offerings to. It is only itself. It is not evil in the way you would call evil. It is what the mountain has instead of a mouth. Do you understand?" Sotaro carefully said, "I don't." "You will." The old man returned to his sharpening. "When your compass fails, you have gone too far. When the trees stop making the sounds you expect trees to make, you have gone too far. When your friend behind you stops talking and you turn around. And he is closer than you thought, looking at you in a way he never has before. You have gone too far. Do you hear me? I hear you. Then hear one more thing. It does not hunt. It waits. And it does not take from you what you would think it would take. It takes what you were before you went up there. Sometimes the man comes back down the mountain, but the man is not the man. He drew the file down the pole again. Sometimes, he said, the man does not come back down at all. And then, in a little while, no one remembers that he ever went up. That is worse. Sotaro stood there in the cold for a long time. Then he asked, because he had to, "What is it called?" Ramatak looked at him and did not say the word. He shook his head. One small, patient shake. You have not earned it yet. You will earn it, or you will not. If you earn it, you will not want it. Come inside and eat. Ayoro will be here by the time the fog burns off. Ayoro arrived a little past mid-morning. He was perhaps 40, though it was hard to tell with him. One of those men whose face has been shaped more by weather than by years. He was taller than Ramatak, broader across the shoulders, with a long braid of black hair graying at the temples. He wore a heavy jacket of tanned deerskin, and across his back he carried a short bow of yew and a quiver of arrows fletched with all feathers, which surprised Sotaro, as he had thought bows and arrows were something the Ainu had put away a generation before. Ayoro saw the surprise and said without smiling, "For where we are going, I do not want the noise of a rifle." Then he looked at Watanabe. Watanabe was cheerful that morning. He had slept well. He had eaten well. He was ready, he said, to see the famous valley that had frightened the elders so much. He said it lightly, in the tone city men use when they mean to be friendly and do not yet know they are being anything else. Ayoro looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Sotaro. "He will be a problem," Ayoro said quietly in Japanese. "Not for me, for you." "He is my assistant," Sotaro said. "Yes," Ayoro said. "I know." They left the Koten at midday. Ramatak walked with them to the edge of the clearing and stopped there, by a certain tree, a great old katsura with a split trunk and lichens hanging from it in long gray beards. He did not say goodbye. He touched the tree once, lightly, with the flat of his palm, looked at Sotaro over his shoulder, turned, and walked back toward the smoke. For the first 2 days, nothing was wrong. They climbed steadily along a game trail that ran along the north side of the river. The country was beautiful in the way untouched country is beautiful. Impossible, almost, in the density of its colors. The maples were red, the birches gold, the sakhalin firs black, green against the sky. Sotaro took his measurements. He counted trunks. He noted the girth of certain cedars that would, he wrote in his official log, make timbers of remarkable dimension. Watanabe walked ahead and behind, asking questions about compass declination and about the pension he would get if he stayed with the bureau another 20 years. Ayoro walked in front of them both and did not speak unless asked. When he was asked, he answered in a single sentence, and then returned to silence. On the evening of the second day, they made camp in a small clearing beside a stream, and Ayoro pointed with his chin at the ridge above them and said, "Tomorrow we go over that, and then we're in the valley." Watanabe asked, "Then we are in the outer part of the valley. Tomorrow is the outer part. The day after is the middle part. The day after that, if you insist, I will take you as far as the birch grove, above the second bend of the river. That is where I stop. I have said this to your—" He paused, choosing a word. "To your master." "He's not my master," Watanabe said, laughing. "He is the one who signs your paper. So he is your master. And he has agreed. When I stop at the birch grove, I stop. You may go on if you wish. I cannot prevent you. But I will wait 3 days. And then I will go back. If you are not back in 3 days, I will tell your master's people in the town that you were not back in 3 days. That is the arrangement." Watanabe looked at Sotaro as though expecting him to argue. Sotaro did not argue. "Agreed," Sotaro said. That night, lying in his blanket beside the low fire, Sotaro wrote 3 lines in his notebook that he would later underline. "Theoro is a serious man. He is not superstitious, he is careful. The old man was not warning me about a bear. Watanabe does not understand what he is walking into. Neither, perhaps, do I a breath here before what comes next. If this is the kind of case you would want to sit with in the dark. Not just hear once, but keep. There is a collection I put together with the people at Forbidden Unresolved Stories Till. What the Mountain Keeps. 10 complete cases, 8 hours, 60, 2 years of records nobody wanted to finish. Each one placed, dated, and signed off with a tidy word that never once fit what happened. The link is in the description below and at the top of the comments. And while I have you, this story is being told tonight on Macabre Story. If you are finding a home here in the quiet late hours, do me the small kindness of subscribing before we go on. And if you are hearing this anywhere but on Macabre Story, someone has taken it without asking. Let us know where. We keep a list. One more thing before we head back up that ridge. I want you to tell me something. Have you ever had a moment out somewhere quiet? On a hike? A country road? A walk back from a car at the edge of the woods? When your own body seemed to know something before your mind did? A chill on the back of your neck? A slowing of your breath? A small stubborn certainty that you were being noticed by something that had no business noticing you? Put it in the comments. Where you were, how old you were, what the weather was doing. I read them. I read all of them. It matters more than you think when someone else has felt the same thing and been afraid to say so. Now, back up the ridge. They crossed it the next morning. The ground on the far side was steeper than the map had suggested and colder, though they had not climbed much. Sotaro noted the change in his book. He noted that at 10 in the morning, at the top of the ridge, his brass compass gave him a clean, true north. And he noted that at 2 in the afternoon, less than a mile inside the outer part of the valley, the same compass. The same needle he had trusted for 11 years of work. Settled onto a bearing that could not possibly be north, and would not shift no matter which way he turned the case. He turned around 3 times. He tapped the glass. He set the compass on a flat stone. The needle stayed where it was, pointing calmly at a bearing that put the sun in the wrong part of the sky. Ayoro was watching him. "Yes," Ayoro said. "It does that here." "How far in does it do that?" "As far in as we are going." "And farther?" Watanabe took out his own compass and made a great show of getting a clean north from it 10 feet away, laughing and saying Sotaro's must have taken a knock somewhere on the trail. Ayoro did not respond to Watanabe. He looked at Sotaro, and Sotaro looked at his own compass, then at Watanabe's, then at his own again. Let me see yours, Sotaro said. Watanabe handed it over. The needle spun once slowly all the way around. Then again. Then it settled on the same bearing as Sotaro's. Watanabe stopped smiling. They walked another 2 hours that afternoon. They saw one deer high up on the ridge to their left, which stood absolutely still for a long time, watching them, then turned and went back over the ridge without hurry. They saw the tracks of what Ayoro said was a bear, at least a day old, and a scuffed place in the moss where the bear had rested. And beyond that, Ayoro pointed out without comment, a second set of tracks, longer than the bear's, that crossed the bear's tracks going in a different direction. Sotaro bent down to look at them and could not decide what animal had made them. They were not right for a wolf, not right for a bear, not right for a boar. There was too much space between the marks, and the marks themselves were shallow, as though whatever made them weighed almost nothing. What is that? Sotaro asked. Ayoro looked at the ground, then at the trees around them. We will not talk here, we will walk. When we are camped tonight, if you still want, I will answer. They walked on. Watanabe, for once, did not talk. They made camp in a stand of black spruce close to a small spring. Ayoro built the fire himself, in a shallow pit he lined with river stones. He did not build it as a Japanese man would. He built it small and low, arranging the wood in an inward, facing pattern Sotaro had never seen before. When it caught, he did not add to it for a long time, letting it burn down almost to coals before he fed it again. When they had eaten, Ayoro sat with his hands in his lap, looking into the fire, and without looking up at Sotaro, answered the question from the trail. The tracks you saw, he said, are not from any animal you have a name for. They are also not made by an animal. That is a hard thing to say in Japanese. In our language it is easier. We would say, this is a rough translation, forgive me. We would say the shape it left when it wanted to be seen. Do you follow? When it wanted to be seen. Yes. You mean it can walk without leaving tracks? I mean it can walk without you knowing it has walked. Sometimes it leaves the tracks not for the ground, but for you. It is a way it has. It puts a mark where a mark will be found, so that you will pick it up and turn it in your hand and wonder. And the wondering is the door. Sotaro was quiet. Watanabe, across the fire, made a small noise that in another setting might have been a laugh, but was not one now. The old man in your village, Sotaro said there was a name. There is. He said I hadn't earned it. Ayoro nodded, still not looking up. You have not. Nor have I earned it, in the way that would mean I could speak it in the open. There is a word we use among ourselves for the class of thing it is. We say, nita torsi, when we do not want to be exact. A thing of the deep places, of the swamps and the black woods. But that is a broad word, a word for many things. What is in this valley is only itself. It has its own name, which the old ones knew. My uncle Ramatek knows it. He has not said it aloud in my hearing, and I have known him 50 years. Why not? Ayoro finally looked up. Because if you say a thing's name where it can hear you, the thing will know that you know it. And once it knows that you know it, it will begin to be curious about you. And once it is curious about you, it will begin to come nearer to see what kind of thing knows its name. And you do not want it nearer. The fire made a small crack. Ayoro fed it a piece of split spruce. Careful, unhurried. It is not that the thing wishes you harm, he said. That is the part your people never seem to understand when we tell them. It is not that it wants to hurt you. It is that its interest is a kind of weather. It comes down on you the way a storm comes down on you, without meaning any of it personally. But you can drown in a storm that does not mean you personally any harm. Watanabe quietly said, "What does it look like?" Ayoro did not answer him. "What does it look like?" Watanabe said again. Ayoro looked at him for a long moment, then said, "You may find that out. I hope you do not." They lay down after that, and no one spoke. The fire burned low, and Sotaro did not sleep for a long time. He listened. Harder than he had ever listened in his life. He heard the small pop of the coals. He heard the wind moving in the tops of the spruces, high and thin. He heard Watanabe's breathing become the steady rhythm of a young man asleep. He heard Ayoro shift once, quietly, and knew from the way he shifted that Ayoro was not asleep either. And underneath all of that, at the edge of hearing, he thought he heard something else. Not a sound exactly, a pressure. The way a room feels when someone has just walked out of it. That faint difference in the air, except no one had walked out of anywhere. He was outside, under trees, miles from another human being. He wrote in his notebook the next morning, "It began last night. Whatever it is, it began." The third day was worse. They pushed deeper. Ayoro's pace slowed. He stopped more often, tilted his head toward the trees, listened for things Sotaro could not hear, then walked on. Sotaro stopped taking measurements. He tried twice, and both times found he had been standing at the base of a cedar with his hand on the measuring tape for what he thought was a minute, which turned out, by his watch, to be closer to 20. Both times Ayoro had already come back for him and was standing a little way off, watching without expression, waiting for him to notice the loss of time on his own. The second time, Sotaro looked at his watch, looked at Ayoro, and said, "This has happened to you before." "Yes." "How do you keep it from happening?" "You cannot keep it from happening. You can only be someone who notices when it has." Watanabe that day began to change. Sotaro could not put it precisely in the notebook. He tried. Ryo is quieter now. Not the quiet of tiredness. He was tired yesterday and he chattered through it. This is a listening quiet. He walks with his head half, turned always, as though waiting to catch the tail of a sentence someone has just spoken behind him. Twice today he stopped and looked back down the trail. I looked back. There was nothing. Once at the noon rest, I turned around, and he was standing much closer to me than I had thought. I had not heard him move. He was looking at me as though he had never seen me before. Then he blinked, and it was gone. He asked if I wanted tea. I did not want tea. That night, the third night, was the last night the three of them were together. They camped at the base of a small cliff, in a place Ayoro had chosen for the way the rock at their backs would keep them from being approached from that direction. He built the fire again in the low, careful way of the first night. He said less than usual. Watanabe said nothing at all. He ate his portion of dried fish and rice, looked at the fire, and after a while lay down with his back to it, and appeared to sleep. Ayoro watched him. Then, when he was sure Watanabe was under, Ayoro leaned close to Sotaro and spoke very quietly. "We will not go the last day. In the morning, I will turn us around. If your friend wishes to argue, let me argue with him. but we will not go the last day. Do you understand? Sotaro said. Yes. Ayuro looked at Watanabe's back for a long time. He is already listening for it. He has been listening for it since noon. It has noticed him. It is coming closer to see what kind of thing has been listening for it. That is how it starts. Sometimes the one who does not believe is the one it comes for first. The believing men know to keep their eyes on the ground and their mouths shut. The unbelieving men look up and around and behind, and they are noticed for it. Is he in danger? He is in the country of the danger. Whether he leaves it or the danger leaves him depends on tomorrow. If he goes back over the ridge with us tomorrow and does not come here again, he will be all right. In a year he will have almost forgotten. In 5 years he will only remember a strange trip, and if he does not. Ayuro did not finish that sentence. He lay down then, with his hand on his bow. Sotaro lay down as well. Neither of them. He wrote later, slept much. Sometime in the deep of the night, Sotaro thought around 3 in the morning, but he could not be sure, because his watch had stopped and no one else's watch was running either. Sotaro opened his eyes and saw that Watanabe was sitting up. Watanabe was sitting up with his hands in his lap. He was facing away from the fire. He was looking very calmly into the dark under the trees at the edge of the camp. Sotaro whispered his name. Watanabe did not turn. Sotaro whispered it again a little louder. Watanabe said, without turning around, in a voice that was almost his own but a little slower than his own. It's all right, Kurihara-san. It's only looking. It's only ever looking, isn't it? Then he lay back down. He lay back down and seemed asleep again within a minute. Sotaro did not sleep at all after that. He watched the tree line. He watched the space between 2 particular black spruces where Watanabe had been looking. And after a long time, a very long time, so long that the sky over the ridge had begun faintly to take on the color it does before dawn, he thought he saw, in the space between the 2 black spruces, a place where the darkness was slightly deeper than the rest of the darkness. A vertical place, man-shaped or nearly, head height, standing or almost standing. He could not have said whether he was really seeing it, or whether his exhausted eye was making a shape out of the space between 2 trees. He did not blink for what felt like a long time. The shape did not move. It did not have to. It was, he thought later, being patient with him. Then the sky lightened another notch, and he blinked in spite of himself, and when he opened his eyes, the shape was gone. Or the shape had never been there, and Ayuro was already sitting up on the other side of the coals with his eyes open. Ayuro said quietly, "Wake him." Sotaro woke Watanabe. Watanabe sat up, stretched, looked around the camp, and smiled the smile he had brought with him from Yokohama. "Good morning," Watanabe said. "Are we going up the last stretch today?" "No," Ayuro said. "We are going back today." "Back? But we haven't reached." "We are going back today," Ayuro said, in a voice not raised but not to be argued with either. Watanabe looked at Sotaro. Sotaro, hearing his own voice as though from a small distance, said, "We are going back today." Watanabe was quiet a moment. Then he said, "Right, if you say so. I could use a bath, honestly." They broke camp. They ate cold rice. They packed the mule. They started back down the trail. At the top of a small rise, perhaps a mile back from the camp, Sotaro turned around one last time to look at the country they were leaving. Ayoro turned with him. Watani was already 20 paces down the far side, whistling, cheerful, unrecognizable to Sotaro as the man who had sat up in the dark and looked into the trees. Sotaro and Ayoro stood there, on that rise for a moment. The valley behind them was full of morning fog, so that only the tops of the tallest firs showed. From up there, it looked like a soft gray lake full of black, green islands. Ayoro said quietly, "Thank you." "For what?" "For turning around. Not all of your countrymen have. The two before you did not. Their families were told the men fell into the river." Sotaro looked at him. "Did they?" Ayoro did not answer. They walked down the rise. They walked for 4 hours. At around 11 in the morning, at a stream where they had stopped to fill the canteens, Sotaro turned around to hand a canteen to Watanabe. And Watanabe was not there. He was not there in a very particular way. Sotaro had heard him 30 seconds before, humming something as he squatted at the bank to wash his face. Sotaro had seen him out of the corner of his eye just before he turned. The humming had not stopped. It had simply thinned, gone from a sound to a memory of a sound. The way a bell goes from ringing to almost ringing to not ringing, without you being able to say when. Sotaro turned around, and Watanabe was not at the stream. His pack was still there. His hat was still there, upside down on a rock, holding water like a cup. His rifle was leaning against a small alder. The boot prints in the mud went from the trail to the water's edge, and then stopped. They did not go anywhere else. Ayoro came back at a run. He looked at the boot prints. He looked at the water. He looked at the trees on the far side of the stream, then at the trees on their side, then at Sotaro. Then he did something Sotaro would remember for the rest of his life. He did not shout Watanabe's name. He did not go crashing into the brush. He did not draw an arrow. He put his hand gently on Sotaro's forearm. "We do not call him. Do you hear me? We do not call his name. Not once. If you call his name into these trees, you will bring back something that has his voice. Do you understand what I am saying to you?" Sotaro understood. Sotaro did not call. They stood there a long time. They looked at the boot prints, at the hat, at the rifle. They waited 15 minutes, half an hour. Ayoro, without speaking, walked slowly around the clearing, examining the mud, examining the moss on the far side of the stream, occasionally looking up at the higher branches for reasons Sotaro did not want to ask about. He returned and stood beside Sotaro and shook his head. One small, tired shake. "He is gone," Ayoro said. "That is all we can know. If he comes back to us in the next hour or the next day, we will look at him carefully before we speak to him. And if what comes back is him, we will bring him out. If it is not him, we will not follow it. How would we tell? You will tell. You knew him. Not well, but you knew him. You will tell." They waited 3 hours at that stream. Nothing came back. At last Ayoro packed Watanabe's things onto the mule, the pack, the hat, the rifle, and they walked out. They walked all afternoon and into the twilight, and they walked in silence. And when they reached the ridge above Ramatak's village and started down toward the smoke, Sotaro realized he had not in all those hours cried, or spoken, or done anything but put one foot down after the other. He had been elsewhere. He had been, though he did not know the word for it yet, listening. Ramatak met them at the Katsura tree. He did not ask what had happened. He looked at Ayoro, and Ayoro shook his head. Ramatak looked at Sotaro, and his old face changed by a very small amount, and he said, "Come inside." Sotaro stayed in the kotan 4 more days. He did not eat much. He slept poorly. On the second day, Ramatak sat with him by the fire pit for a long time and finally said, "I will tell you 3 things, and then we will not speak of it again in this life." Sotaro waited. "The first thing," Ramatak said, "your friend is not the first, and he will not be the last. There were 2 before you in my own memory. There will be others. Your bureau will send them. My people will try to warn them. Some will listen, some will not. The mountain does not care which. The second thing, your friend did not suffer. That is not what happens up there. What happens up there is that a man goes quietly. He goes into the noticing. He becomes part of the listening. He does not know he is doing it. There is no pain in it that we have ever been able to see. You may tell his family what you like when you go home. If it comforts you to tell them he fell in the river, tell them he fell in the river. He fell into something. That is the truth in the shape they will bear. The third thing." Ramatak looked up, and Sotaro met his eyes, and Ramatak said, "No, you have earned the name." He said it. He said it once, quietly in Ainu, so quietly that Sotaro, who wrote it down that night, wrote it phonetically, and never included it in any transcription of his account, never spoke it aloud to another person, and marked in the margin of the notebook, in his careful surveyor's hand, the words, "This word is not to leave this page. I will honor that." Sotaro left the kotan on the 5th day. Ioro walked with him 3 days out, until they reached the wagon road. There, he shook his hand once, formally, in the Japanese way, turned, and walked back toward the mountains without another word. Sotaro rode the wagon to the train. He rode the train to the coast. He took a ship to Omori. He took another train south. By the middle of November, he was in Sapporo, in the regional office of the Imperial Forestry Bureau, sitting across a desk from a superintendent named Ono, 2 years younger than he was, who had never seen the inside of the sissy. Sotaro gave his report. He filed a note on the valley in careful bureaucratic language, saying the terrain had proven impractical for further survey, and that prior notations regarding failed surveys were here confirmed. He suggested respectfully that the valley be removed from the current cycle of assessment and revisited by a different team in a different season, if at all. Superintendent Ono took the report. He read it. He set it down. Then he said, "And your assistant?" Sotaro said, "He fell into the river on the way back. We could not recover him." Superintendent Ono looked at him for a long moment. Then Superintendent Ono said slowly, "I have no record of an assistant." Sotaro opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "Watine Ryohei," Sotaro said, 28 years old, from Yokohama. You assigned him to me in a letter dated the 14th of August. I have the letter in my kit. I assigned no such person. I have the letter. I have not written such a letter." Superintendent Ono opened a drawer, pulled out the file for the Kitami survey, Sotaro's own file, and turned it around so Sotaro could read it. Sotaro read it. His name was on the assignment. His rote was on the assignment. Requisitions for 1 man, 1 mule, 3 months of provisions, 2 rifles for bear, were on the assignment. There was no second name anywhere. There was no assistant. Sotaro's hands were shaking a little by then. He excused himself. He walked back to the boarding house where his kit was, opened the kit, opened the folder inside, and searched every page of every document he had brought with him from Saitama. There was no letter of assignment for Watanabe Ryohei. There had been. He was certain he remembered folding it. He remembered a small ink spot on the lower right corner. He remembered thinking when he first opened it in his Sendai kitchen, with Fuzi looking over his shoulder, that assistants were a mixed blessing on trips like this, and he hoped this one had good boots. The letter was gone. Sotaro sat on the edge of the boarding house bed for a long time. Then he got up, went to the post office, and sent a telegram to the office in Yokohama. He thought might be Watanabe's, asking after any employee of that name. It came back 3 days later. No employee of that name on record. No such person in our staff files, present or prior. He tried over the next month 4 other places he thought Watanabe might have come from. Schools. A former employer Watanabe had mentioned in passing, a cousin in Yokohama, whose name he thought he could remember. He got the same answer from all of them, in slightly different words. No such person. No record. Are you sure of the name? He was sure of the name. He was the only person in the whole of Japan who was sure of the name. He wrote in his notebook on the last useful page. The old man said, "Sometimes the man does not come back down. And then in a little while, no one remembers he ever went up. That is worse. I did not understand that when he said it. I understand it now. Ryo existed. He walked beside me for 11 days. He talked about his mother in Yokohama. He talked about a girl named Setsuko, whom he had promised to marry. He liked his tea over sweet. He hummed a song I did not recognize, that I would recognize now if I heard it again. He was real. He was as real as I am. And now he is not just dead. He is unremembered. The mountain did not only take him from the world. The mountain took him from having ever been in the world. There is only one place now where he still exists. This page. Sotaro went home to Fuzi. He never told her. He never told anyone. He returned to work. He was reassigned to less interesting country. He did his measurements. He filed his reports. He raised no complaints. He wrote no memoir. Once, in 1923, he was offered a position that would have taken him back to Hokkaidō, and he refused it without giving a reason. The Bureau did not press him. Men who had gone north sometimes did not want to go north again. The Bureau was used to it. He died in the winter of 1934, of pneumonia, in a hospital in Saitama. Fuzi was with him. He was 49 years old. His last recorded words in the hospital notes were, "Tell them not to send any more up there. Please tell them." The hospital assumed he was delirious. Fuzi did not know what to make of it. She kept the notebook. It went into a wooden crate along with many other papers of his, and the crate went into storage. Fuzi remarried in 1939, moved to Osaka, and left the crate with a shipping office in Otaru that Sotaro had once used for the bureau, intending to send for it. And then, in the way of such things, never doing so, she died in 1957. The crate stayed where it was. In 1962, a caretaker at that shipping office, tidying up, opened the crate to see if it was worth keeping. He read the notebook. He put the notebook back in the crate. He put the crate in a different, more private place and did not tell anyone about it. He was Ainu himself, on his mother's side. He had heard, growing up, certain things whispered by certain elders on winter nights. And he understood. When he had finished reading, that Sotaro's notebook was not the kind of thing that ought to be widely known. He kept it. The notebook came to light only after that caretaker's death. I have read it. I have read it more than once. I have set it down and gone for walks and come back and read it again. And I want to tell you the thing that stays with me most. It is not the shape in the trees, though I think about the shape in the trees. It is not the compass, though the compass gets into my dreams. It is not even the missing man, though the missing man is what your mind wants to return to. What stays with me is a single note Sotaro made in the margin on one of the last pages of the notebook. It is dated in his hand, the winter of 1933, less than a year before he died. He had by then been carrying the notebook around for 14 years without writing anything new in it. The margin note is in a shakier hand than the rest of the book. He was already sick. He knew, I think, that he was already sick. The margin note says only this: sometimes at night, in the last minute before I fall asleep, I have a thought I did not think. I have a thought that arrives in my head fully formed, and I know it is not mine, because it is a thought in a language I do not fully speak. It is a thought in the language of the man who taught me my name. The thought is this: that the mountain has not forgotten me either. That when the time comes I will not be afraid, that I have already, in some measure, been listening for it my whole life. He wrote that in the winter of 1933. He died the following January. Nothing in his medical file suggests he was afraid at the end. Fuzi said in a letter she wrote to her sister the week after the funeral that Sotaro's last hour was the calmest she had ever seen him. That he looked, she said, like a man who had just stepped out of a room and was standing in the hall a moment, listening back through the door to make sure everything inside was as he had left it. That is the story. That is what the Ainu elder told a Japanese surveyor in the autumn of 1919, and what the Japanese surveyor spent 15 years not saying to anyone, and what he wrote down anyway, because he could not carry all of it alone. There is a valley in the Kitami Highlands of northern Hokkaidō, and it is on no timber map I have ever seen printed. There are people still in the small villages on the near side of the ridge who will smile politely if you ask them about it, pour you a cup of tea, and change the subject. I have been up there once, not into the valley, only to the ridge. I stood at the katsura tree, or a katsura tree, at the edge of what had been Koten, and was now a wide grassy clearing, with the outlines of house pits still faintly visible in the ground. I stood there in the late afternoon in autumn, and I listened. And I felt, for perhaps a minute and a half, exactly what Sotaro had described. The pressure at the back of the neck, the sense that a room somewhere had just had someone walk out of it. The suspicion, very faint, that I was being noticed, not with malice, but with the slow, indifferent attention of very old weather. I turned around and walked back down the mountain. I have not been back. I do not intend to go back. I do not, if you will forgive me, entirely believe I have been permitted not to go back. But that is a thought for another night. Tell me in the comments, do you believe there are places on the earth that are not for us? Not haunted in the ordinary sense. Not cursed. Not the setting of any single sad story. But simply older than us, and busy with something else, and best walked around. I want to hear if someone in your family, once, In the country where you grew up, called a certain hill or a certain patch of woods a name in a low voice and told you not to go there. I know they did. Tell me what they called it. Tell me where. And if you know a story like this, a real one an old relative told you, one that has been sitting in your chest without a home, you can write it to us. We read them. Some of them become the next quiet night, the next voice in the dark. Stay with us for the next one. Until then, mind the ridges. Mind the compass when it settles somewhere it should not. And if the birds go quiet on your walk through a wood you thought you knew, do the same thing Sotaro learned to do up there. In 1919, above the last logging cut in the Kitami Highlands, in a valley the maps forgot on purpose, turn around, walk out. Do not call any name into the trees. And if you feel, on the way down, that the mountain is watching you go, do not turn around a second time to check. You will not see anything. You will only make it curious. Her file content end.